Welcome back to the Situation Room with the CNN political analyst. We're continuing with our coverage of the aftermath of World War II, and we have updated numbers coming in as we speak. Take a look at this footage recorded earlier today. We have had live coverage in Germany, the United States, Japan, and the Soviet Union all week long on everything from economics to social effects of the war. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers are being returned to their homes all around the world today. It is an international day of celebration and mourning for both the homecoming soldiers and the grief for the patriots who never made it home. Impatient families wait in suspense to see if their loved ones will return from the battlefields. Unfortunately, all too many were greeted by the coffins of the deceased or the horrors of the knowledge that their loved ones are still missing. The Soviet Union still towers above all, with at least 26 million casualties as of right now. Germany has taken the cake with the most money spent on the war, a whopping $212 billion, with the analysts still tallying up the last of the records.
And those images just absolutely warm the heart, and we actually just received word that the last of 3 post-war conferences is concluded. The Tehran, Yalta, and Potsdam conferences were all organized as a post-war cleanup effort. The Tehran was a conference about 2 years back between the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union. And it basically consisted of discussions of ways to keep the peace between countries, in particular Germany. Something called the United Nations was also proposed during the conference, but no other information has been released to the press on that subject since. The Yalta Conference occurred 6 months back, with the end of the war fastly approaching. Again, that was between the Big Three, and the conference consisted of talk about under what conditions and with what effects Germany was to surrender, as well as how to get them to unconditionally surrender. The Potsdam Conference is the one that we just received word has concluded, and that was between the Big Three again to discuss post-war arrangements to be made in Europe. They also discussed the conditions for surrender with Japan. We actually have a statement from General Douglas MacArthur from earlier today. Quote, Japan must immediately agree to unconditionally surrender or face prompt and utter destruction. Here's a piece of footage from earlier in the conference from President Truman.
We're here today to raise the flag of victory over the capital of our greatest adversary. Let's not forget that we are fighting for peace and for the welfare of mankind. There's not one piece of territory or one thing of a monetary nature that we want out of this war. We want peace and prosperity for the world as a whole.
But we begin our coverage today in Japan with Megan Young covering the repercussions of the war on everything from economics to the devastating effect of the atomic bomb. Megan?
Well, Lucy, to say that is absolute devastation over here would be an understatement. Citizens are trying to get back to everyday life after the devastation from the bomb and Japan's surrender have taken place. Landmarks that the people over here once knew are almost all completely unrecognizable. Within a radius of about 3 miles, 60,000 to 90,000 buildings were completely wiped out. Because of the heat of the bomb, many parts of buildings like metal, clay, and even stone have melted. But even worse than the infrastructure, upon immediate impact of the bomb, 70,000 civilians, which means men, women, and yes, children, were killed. That number is expected to rise in the coming weeks and even over the next few years.
Yeah, Megan, and do you have any information on why that number is expected to rise?
Well, Lucy, in addition to the immediate results from the blast of the bomb, there are some long-term effects expected because of the radiation that is released from an atomic bomb. There's expected to be cases of leukemia, deaths from the burns that victims received from the bomb, and tumors are expected to appear from radiation sickness. Other less serious effects from the bomb include hair loss, bleeding, and severe nausea. Clearly, the situation over here won't look good for a while. The Allies plan to occupy Japan over the next few years to reform the government and change the country, so hopefully nothing like this will ever happen again. We're just receiving word that the Japanese have surrendered. Here's Charles Collab with more.
General of the Army Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Allied Commander for the occupation of Japan, boards the Missouri. Fleet Admiral Nimitz, Pacific Fleet Commander, and Admiral Halsey, welcome MacArthur and his Chief of Staff, General Sutherland, aboard. Admiral Nimitz escorts General MacArthur to the Missouri's veranda deck, where the 20-minute ceremony is to take place. It is Sunday, September 2nd, 1945. Cameramen and reporters of many countries record this historic moment. The Japanese delegation lines up on the opposite side of the surrender table from the Allies. A war which had entered its 8th terrible year in China, which had raged for 3 years and 9 months for America and Britain, which was the brutal, costly eastern half of the most horrible worldwide war in human history, is now within minutes of ending for good. General MacArthur speaks. We are gathered here, representatives of the major warring powers, to conclude a solemn agreement whereby peace may be restored. The issues involving divergent ideals and ideologies have been determined on the battlefields of the world, and hence are not for our discussion or debate. The terms and conditions upon which surrender of the Japanese imperial forces is here to be given and accepted are contained in the instrument of surrender now before you. As Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, I announce it my firm purpose, in the tradition of the countries I represent, to proceed in the discharge of my responsibilities with justice and tolerance, while taking all necessary dispositions to ensure that the terms of surrender are fully, promptly, and faithfully complied with.
Okay, well, all our thoughts are with Japan as they struggle to recover from their devastating situation. And now we go to Maggie Carroll, who's stationed in the Soviet Union, covering their post-war cleanup efforts. Maggie?
Hi, I'm reaching you here today from Moscow. I'm here to witness the devastation of the war. Things have been pretty bad in the past few years, and the farmland has been entirely destroyed. The area is barren, partially because of the bombing campaigns and the Germans' tactics, and partially because of the Soviets' policy where they would burn everything to the ground before the Germans would take over an area. They left no resources behind to help with the German front, but this also means they left no resources behind for themselves once they retook their country. Roughly a quarter of this country's resources have been destroyed, and the military losses at this moment are estimated around 8 million. The civilian casualties are estimated around 16 million. Stalin is trying to recover though. He's pushing heavy industry bounds to get the economy moving again. This is projected to have the steel production at twice its level in 1940 by 1953. The people are still struggling though because agricultural and domestic goods productions are down. They're previous to the levels before the war, and they're not really being pushed to be increased, so the quality of life is not very good. The economy is increasing though, and Soviet Russia has emerged a superpower from this war. Their forces are built up extremely well, and the war has inspired a nationalism in its people so that they fully support communism and have put all efforts back into it. A new program is emerging from a close associate of Stalin's, Zandov, to help launch a campaign to keep cultural aspects from their own country in and push Western influences out so they can return to the way they were previous to the war. That's all that I have for you today. Back to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Maggie. Now we go to Sarah Reichard, reporting from Berlin on the current situation Germany's facing.
Hello, Lucy. I'm reporting here in Berlin, and like many other cities, it has been reduced to rubble from the Allied carpet bombing during the war. Some 3.4 million apartments of a total 17.1 million were completely flattened, and another 30% were in severe disrepair. The housing shortage has been worsened by the 11 million refugees coming from Eastern European countries. The industrial production here is at a virtual standstill, and food is extremely scarce.
What about the death toll?
Unfortunately, it was enormous. Some 7 million Germans had been killed, and about 3.2 of that 7 million were civilians, like women, children, and the elderly. The overall civilian health of the survivors here has been dramatically deteriorated, and 1 million were left disabled. Not to mention the 1.3 million Wehrmacht soldiers missing in action. There were also large numbers of displaced people. There are between 25,000 and 30,000 refugees constantly passing through Berlin. The foreign workforces that were forced into German factories and farms during the war were left to wander the devastated German countryside or to live in makeshift camps. There are about 1.5 million Russian displaced persons, 1.2 million Frenchmen, 600,000 Poles, 400,000 Dutch and Belgians, 350,000 Italians, 100,000 Yugoslavs, and many more. Now back to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Sarah. Now here's our intern, Sandra Carrillo from Chicago, with more information on how the U.S. is faring at the closing of this historic war.
Thanks, Lucy. Well, we're looking pretty good over here in the United States compared to the other countries around the globe. Other countries have faced such destruction, while things here in the US of A are looking pretty bright. Our economy has actually risen and has been the best it has been in years in comparison to other countries, of which the economy has actually plummeted to extreme lows. Factories have sprung up all over the country, providing an employment boom and much needed economic support for the country. Throughout the war, we hit our lowest point in history, yet with unemployment rates hitting lows of up to 30%, and the people suffering from the economic depression. But as of today, our nation has seemed to bounce back fast and is now stronger than ever. We cannot help but feel financially secure since our nation's capita income has doubled, and the Lend-Lease Act that President Roosevelt signed in 1941 has actually gained the country from around $43 to $50 million. Not only that, but the women of our nation have also been facing plenty of change in our country. Not that many women nowadays are working, being sent back into their typical roles as wives and mothers once the male soldiers finally return from overseas. But it is now not so strange to see women working outside the typical textile industry worker or housewife role. Saying that, though, the country has still not changed much for these women and citizens of other races, for their treatment has not really been better. No matter what the people and the government are admitting about racial treatment within the country, things have not changed socially, no matter how many people are trying to change it. Well, that's all for now. I'm Sandra Carrillo reporting live from Chicago, Illinois, and now back to Lucy in the studio.
Well, that'll do it for us tonight, folks. Tune in tomorrow to hear the top 10 reasons your telephone could kill you. I'm Lucy Roper reporting from the Situation Room at the CNN News Desk. Have a great night.
Hello, Lucy.
Okay.
Sorry. 3 words like it's 2 words.
You're so cute. Okay, ready? I wish boys thought that. It's so lonely, forever alone. I can't. Okay.
Well, Lucy, to say that is... I can't. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay. Shh. I'm gonna put down. I can't. Okay. It's hard. It is so hard. Because I know it's not funny, it's actually really serious.
Other countries have faced such destruction, while things here in the US of A are looking pretty bright. Our economy has actually...
Interruption. Will the following students please comments before their lunch period?
What if they walk in and I'm like, it was...
It's true.
I wish that recorded.
It is recorded.
It's recorded.